Good afternoon, and welcome to the Sustainable Materials Management Webinar Series, a joint effort between the National Recycling Coalition and the Pennsylvania Recycling Market Center. My name is Wayne Bowen. I'm the Program Manager for the Recycling Market Center and will serve as your moderator today. We would like to extend a special thanks to Bob Hollis of the Mobius Network for providing the webinar management software for this series, and Lisa Ruggiero and Savannah Batowski of the National Recycling Coalition for assisting the RMC with webinar promotion and technical support. Today's webinar focus is on nonprofit organizations. Our presenter today is John O'Malley, who I will introduce in a moment. Following the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. If you have a question or comment, please use the GoToWebinar dialog box located in the control panel on your screen. You may also use the dialog box to request assistance if you are experiencing technical difficulties during the webinar. Please note that an edited version of this webinar will be made available for viewing via YouTube links on the National Recycling Coalition and PA Recycling Market Center websites. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. John O'Malley is principal of Pasadena, California-based O'Malley International Associates, a global communications agency specializing in training, consulting, and writing services for schools, universities, nonprofit groups, businesses, foundations, government agencies, trade associations, private and public institutions, and individuals. Over the last 22 years, his agency has customized strategies and solutions for clients to successfully and profitably meet their goals. John also regularly conducts proposal writing workshops and technical writing seminars at universities and community sites around the nation and overseas, including the UK and the Middle East. Prior to forming his communications practice, John worked as a staff writer for the Los Angeles Daily Journal, publisher of the nation's largest daily newspaper, and is editor and reporter at the Los Angeles Business Journal, the nation's largest weekly business newspaper. He worked as a radio announcer and producer for top-rated local stations in the Northwest, and previously John served in the U.S. Navy for 6 years as a military journalist. John served as an instructor and program specialist at the Los Angeles Unified School District, where he spearheaded the district's efforts to develop workforce training and education programs for high-profile organizations, such as General Motors, United Auto Workers, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and Walt Disney. In addition, he successfully performed grant writing tasks in support of education and training programs for the district's Adult Education and Vocational Training Division. John also worked as a development officer, consultant on behalf of charitable giving programs supported by American Express, Citigroup, Avery Dennison, Magic Johnson Foundation, T-Zone Foundation, and other organizations. He's active in civic and charitable organizations, most notably through membership on the board of directors of the International Institute of Los Angeles, a nonprofit group that has provided social services to communities for more than 100 years. He also serves on the President's Council for Chinese Garden at the Huntington Library, Art Collections, and Botanical Gardens in San Marino, California. John holds a Master of Science degree from Mount St. Mary's College and a Bachelor's of Arts degrees from Marquette University. Okay, I'm going to turn the program over to John, and off you go.
Oh, thank you very much, Wayne, and thank you for everyone coming to this presentation on how to gain funding for your nonprofit, funding from not only the government, but also foundations, that's the private philanthropy sector, corporations, and other groups that, particularly individuals who may give you support for your good works at your agencies. And so for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to go over more or less the mindset that you need to have to create strong approaches, in this case, strong proposals to foundations, or let's just call them all grant makers, and how to look at this task in a creative and I would say innovative fashion so that you can get their attention, particularly the funders, and to show them what is best about your agency, what is best about what you do for the community, and what is best about what you're going to do for the future and make things better. So we're going to focus more or less on the actual tool that you'll use, what I call the marketing tool, which is your proposal. And one thing I want everyone to keep in mind, try to avoid writing proposals to yourself. This is one of the things that is probably the worst thing you could do if you need money. You say, I need money, I need to write something, I'm just going to write it down and give it to someone. They'll like what we are doing, and they will give us a check. So let's just take that away. Do not write to yourself when you're preparing proposals. You're writing to someone else. So let's go to the next slide here. So preparation is important. So this particular discussion, we'll talk about how to prepare yourself, prepare your sort of mindset, and also prepare your content to persuade others to give you a check, particularly those organizations, grant makers, that do not know you, do not care about you, and do not care about the cause. Now that sounds a little harsh, but your mission is to convince them that you have a good cause and that you can do good works and make a difference, and convince them to join forces with you to tackle a problem, the problems you take on each day. Next slide. So I'm just joking here. This is not truly the easy formula for grant writing, but there are things to keep in mind. Number one, all proposals are written to persuade. In other words, everything you do, even when you contact a potential funder, is sort of meant to persuade, to show what you are all about. And when I say proposals are written to persuade, that means everything you put down in writing must be geared or shaped in such a way that it's going to persuade others to pay attention. As Cicero said more than 2,000 years ago, if you wish to persuade someone, you must touch what they touch, you must see what they see, you must hear what they hear. In other words, as you're thinking of how am I going to persuade a funder, you must know the funder as much as possible and understand what they want, because only if you understand what they want will you be able to persuade them. So those are more or less tips. We're in the art of friendly, winning persuasion when we write our proposals. So that's the formula. Okay, next slide. And this is just a nice quote from Mr. Twain. Next slide. So why do we do proposals? Why do we need to do this to get money for RAZ? And I'm going to go into the context of our time, what's going on, what we're faced with now in November 2016, and how we look at 2017 as far as our future and grant seeking, and how do we create proposals now in this new environment. But let's go back a little bit. The necessary reality that we're dealing with. Everyone who's going to give you money needs something in writing. And a proposal was written, tangible evidence of your ability to meet that particular funder's needs, what they want to invest in, what they want to know about you. So that's why we must write. And our proposal is something they can touch digitally or touch, with the hard copy of your proposal. And every proposal must be able to show that you can run a project, or you've done good works, you have the right team, you are qualified, you are able to get a project accomplished. When you write a proposal, all your proposals should touch the heart and mind of a grant maker or a single benefactor. And you do this by offering a solution to the right problem. Remember, the problem is never the fact that you don't have enough money to do something and so forth and so on. The problem is what everyone's interested in, you and the funder, to fix. That's why they're going to get, it's not your problem, it's the problem that both of you see as harming your community or something that needs to be fixed to better your community through your recycling efforts, for example. Also, when you write a proposal, you have to make effective decisions. You know, you're under a deadline. You have to produce content either online or in hard copy, or put together some type of letter to get a sponsor perhaps, but everything you decide you put in that letter, what the amount will be, how much work it will take, how long it will take, who's going to do the job. All those things are important when you make your presentation or make your proposal, and they actually reflect the kinds of decisions you make. I remember a few years ago, I got a phone call from the governor's office of Utah. They asked me to do a proposal. It was for $15 million, and it was due January 5th. And they called me around December 18. And when they called, they said, "We need help in doing this proposal." And I said, "Well, let me look at it online." It was a U.S. Department of Labor proposal. And I looked at it, and I thought, oh, it's not that bad. It's 63 questions that need to be answered, and they're divided in 3 for government, for the private sector, and for education. I called back the governor's office in Utah and said, how many decisions have been made, or how much of the answers to the questions have been written down? And there was silence. This is December 18. It's due January 5th. So she told me none. Nothing has been done. And so I said, well, here's how we're going to do this. And I just want to tell you, you're not going to get your $15 million. And the reason I'm telling you this story is that proposals mean decisions need to be made. Decision making is part of this whole effort. And if you wait and wait before the deadline, you're going to be caught short. And part of the necessary reality of proposal development is making decisions. Now, we did submit the proposal on time, and we did get $100,000 to redo the proposal. So it's not such a failure. But the only reason I'm using this example is to tell you that it's important. It's important that the reality here is decisions and how you're going to shape your approach to persuade someone to give you funding. All right, next slide, Wayne. Next slide. All right, let's go to, okay. Now these are myths about proposals or grant seeking or seeking funds. I'm just going to put down some, when I say they're myths, that means the statements here are false. So here's one, and this is what we're facing today. Due to uncertainty in global and U.S. markets and in the new policy directions of the Trump administration, grant awards will be limited in 2017. Well, I can tell you right now that's false. Priorities will be changing. If you're looking at government funding, priorities may be changing, but I'm not, you know, and where emphases will be made, you won't see that change until 2017 October. But the budgets for government agencies have been set. All 26 government agencies, federal government agencies that give out money, those budgets are already set, and they were set by the Obama administration in this past October. So I don't see any much change, but you need to watch how budgets will be aligned for the following fiscal year. But again, I don't see much change in government funding for the causes that you are espousing in your agency. So what's going to happen with the markets? As you can see, the markets, the stock markets, and even the global markets are at times going up and down, rallying. And the markets overall for the past 3 years have been going up. What that means for you as a grant seeker seeking money from a foundation, a corporate foundation, any other type of foundation. What that means is that their assets have grown, their ability to give out grants to you, your nonprofit. This is a wonderful time to seek grant money. And in fact, if I were seeing all of you face to face, I would be saying, let's get busy finding the right funder and then submitting our proposal to get funding for our cause. This is one of the golden moments of grant seeking because the markets are so high. The assets of all foundations have grown because foundations invest their assets in the markets, and they're conservative, so they're growing. They're not taking a lot of risk. The foundations are, like they may have done, 7 or 10 years ago. So this is a golden time to seek dollars from foundations, private philanthropy at this tier. I would say this is between now and the end of next year. Get your proposals in to get money because the assets of these groups have grown leaps and bounds, and so I'm very, positive about the ability for all of you to seek monies from private philanthropy, and I'm not concerned or pessimistic about monies from government sources. All right, next slide. All right, one myth that is out there at times, so you must have a long-term relationship with a funder to get a grant or a sponsorship. And I'll just say quickly, that is false. What you need is something that has heft and persuasive power, and it's on paper or on the screen, and you can convince, and also how you speak to a funder is important too, and you could do that, initiate for the first time, and you'll find yourself with a grant to do the works you need to do. So this is a myth, but you may hear that from colleagues or supervisors or those in the know in the philanthropic field. Still, that is a myth. All right, next slide. Successful proposal writing depends on an overly scholarly style. When you're writing proposals or any type of communication content, particularly in the fields that you're in, it has to be clear. It has to be easy to read. And one secret about proposals that are read by foundation program officers or government program officers and review your proposals is that they read your proposal, I would say, carelessly. And they don't take a lot of time. So the more easy for them to understand what the purpose of your request is, what the problem is you're trying to address, and the plan that you're using to fix this problem, and also how you're going to evaluate your success, how clearly you present that is important. So as far as a scholarly style, I would say lose the abstractions in your proposals. Focus on concrete words, picture words, particularly in the work that you do, and it'll be much more powerful. All right, next slide. Collaboration. Now, collaboration with others in doing proposals can go two ways. You may need partners. In fact, one of the best strategies for most of you, I would think, is to collaborate with others to seek funding from foundations in particular, and also you may be required with government contracts or grants to work with others. So that is important, but when you put together your ideas and you form your proposals and how you shape them in such a way, and you bring in others to come in to work with, make sure that everyone has some type of clarity about their role in the project, and also some type of clarity in the role they'll play in writing the proposal or in developing the content and arranging how this all your activities will be parceled out and shared to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So be careful about collaboration. there should be someone. Let's look at collaboration in the sense of developing a proposal before it's submitted. It's important that you have a chief writer for a proposal. It's important that you have some type of coordinator or scheduler for meeting all the deadlines. It's important that you have another type of researcher or coordinator to work with gathering information on deadline, meet deadlines prior to the official deadline that the foundation needs or the government sponsor or agency has put out there. So it's important that you organize like a team. It's almost like a sports team. You have different positions, and somebody though has to be in charge, be the quarterback or the coach, to get things done. When I work with clients, I systematize our system to get a proposal done at the highest level, at the highest quality. So I have everyone's position in place before we move forward, and we put those positions in place at the very beginning of the proposal development process. We even have someone who will do the communications part of making sure all the memos and all the contacts, even with the funder, are all done and sound, in a way that's important to us to gather information to do a good, strong proposal here. Very important. And the other thing is, I want one person who could do quality assurance. So before it goes out the door, or it gets hit with the send button, that someone is reviewing this proposal before it goes out. I can't tell you how many horror stories I've heard over the last few months of proposals that had not had this sort of double check, triple check of quality assurance. And if we have time, I'll tell you more stories of that. All right, now let's go on to the next slide. Myth 5. Grants are awarded to organizations that have the greatest need. Now that's completely false. If we're going in the area of grants, grants go to those who know how to make a good case for themselves. And that means understanding the funder, particularly, understanding the needs of the funder, and have spoken to the funder, and have put together an argument that this is the issue we need to deal with, and our plan is the best plan, our people are the best people, and we can do the job with good results, measurable results to get the project finished. So even if you have seen what's out there in the community and there's needs, don't assume that your need is going to sell your particular organization or the project that you're proposing. Don't rely on that. Rely on doing a good job with your proposal. And yes, there are odds for your proposal and all that. If there are questions related to that, I can offer guidance on that. But let's move on to the next slide. All right, grant makers, those who give you a check, are eager to read about your organization and what you're proposing. And of course, that is false. I've been a reviewer for both foundation and government agencies. What we want to see are good, coherent, powerful proposals. That's what we want to see. We don't want to see proposals that are pasted from, using content from several years ago and pasted in there and all that hurriedly put together, or the logic is not strong where it's, it's keyed on what the funder may want to see. And you have to collect the intelligence on the funder to make them not only alert that the fact that you're going to be proposing something to them, but also you need to know how they think, how they see the world. It's very important for you as a nonprofit leader to understand the giving community and understand their thinking and their philosophies behind giving. And that way you can work with them. It seems obvious, and I know many of you understand this, but particularly now, it's important to get back in touch with funders by phone or by in person if you have a chance. even by email. Understand where they're headed. You need that information for all your benefactors, the individual donors, the corporate foundation, the government contract. You need to assess and refresh your intel on potential funders. All right, next slide, please. Now, here are common barriers to persuading or selling your organization to funders. And we're going to talk a little bit about each one. And I want to go over, what not to do for this short presentation, because I think that's more important than telling you what to do, because I think it's just the style of how I want to present these minutes with you today. So, common barriers to persuading or selling your organization to funders. Insufficient understanding of current funding trends. If you were all before me in a classroom, I would ask you, what is current or trendy? What's happening now in the world of recycling? Where are the trends? Where are we going with recycling for the next year, for the next 3 years, with the next 5 years? Where are we going? That's important to know. And then, especially, what are the funders thinking about, and relating that your issues with what funders are thinking about. Recycling, the economy, jobs, all these things are going to their perceptions are going to be changing, perhaps because of what the results of the election were. But be on top of this, read and understand current funding trends, because if you miss that, you may not be able to connect with a funder in 2017. Inadequate appreciation of a funder's priorities or self-image. Okay, who are we dealing with? Who are we dealing with? The funder, all right? Now, quick story. I was dealing with the Ford Foundation in New York, one of the top 5 foundations, actually in the world. And there was a presentation downtown Los Angeles not too long ago, and the Ford Foundation program officer was there to ask all of us on the West Coast, why aren't we submitting grants to them? Why aren't you focused on what we could do for you out on the East Coast, Ford Foundation? Why aren't we? And they were here because they weren't seeing enough applications from California. Anyway, at the event, there were around 400 to 600 attendees, most of them nonprofit organizations. And this gentleman, Mr. Garcia, said that he explained how to approach the Ford Foundation and so forth and so on. And someone raised their hand and said, what are your top priorities for this year, Mr. Garcia? And he said homelessness. That's something we need to take care of, we need to address. So there were a number of nonprofits in the audience who were very encouraged by this. And then Mr. Garcia said, but I want to warn everyone. We are not going to fund any project that deals with women and children. We are not going to fund any project that deals with training. We are not going to fund any project that deals with sheltering. There was complete silence in the auditorium. Then someone said, well, what do you want to fund? He said, what I want to fund, I'm going to work on homeless men between 21 and 51. Any project that has that target population, I will fund. And I'll tell you one more thing. We're only going to deal with a project that has soccer as the key way of increasing self-esteem, increasing a realistic career direction, and so forth and so on. Soccer has to be part of this. And I'm going to fund projects all around the world. Well, there was almost a revolution or a riot in the audience, claiming that Mr. Garcia from the Ford Foundation, doesn't understand what we face here in our communities. He said, maybe, but he said, this is what I'm going to fund. And the only reason I tell you that story, I want you to appreciate how foundation, such as Ford, sees itself. They're funding only the most innovative projects, the projects that will get the most attention at times, and the most dramatic solutions or innovative solutions that are, in a sense, off the hook. And he said that to everyone. No one, several people did continue to shout and yell at Mr. Garcia, but the whole idea here is this is what they want to fund. So, I mean, there are around 90,000 foundations out there. So, again, understand who you're dealing with and don't try to argue with or disagree. Understand, and then perhaps gently you could show a different approach. All right. Failing to validate the funder's information. All right. That's a big issue. I really am skeptical about all the information put on websites about a foundation's website in particular, and even with government agencies that post their applications or their initiatives. You need to dig deep. You need to figure out what other priorities are being emphasized. You need also to, with a foundation's website, look at the bottom. It may say 2011, 2012. You know, is the information current? You've got to find out. So without finding out, you're nowhere, you can't go anywhere. So that's important, that last item. Let's go to the next one, Wayne. All right, another common barriers. Ineffective organization and staffing approaches to proposal process. That means how you're organized to do a proposal. So if you don't have a good process to put out good quality work, that's a barrier to getting funded. And how you do that, it should not be left in just one person's hands. It should be a collaborative effort, a team effort with everyone involved. And this is an important task. It's an essential task to any nonprofit organization to have a good development person, a good proposal writer, a good researcher, a good way of persuading, understanding the funders. And this is essential to you, to your nonprofit. All right, problematic analysis of data to support reasons for writing proposals. Without knowing any of you out there, but knowing that the area that you're busy with, the recycling area, you know, collecting data. What are the issues, the problems in data to support your effort and support your effort to do more good work, to expand your services in the area of recycling. Very important to get the right data, because if you don't have the right data, you can't make the good argument that we need such and such amount of money. All right, lack of attention to quality assurance. What that is all about is that quality assurance, is that how does the proposal, there's two ways of looking at it. Stylistically, you know, how your grammar, punctuation, word, the kinds of words you use and so forth, very important. And also whether or not everything in your proposal before you hit the button matches the high standards of your agency as well as the expectations of the funder. All right, let's go on to the next slide, please. Here's one, and again, I would focus a little bit more on this, and I'll have another slide coming up. But you know, how you see yourself, your assessment of your own organization in 2016, and your ability to seek funding, to seek donations. How is that? How do you look to others? That's important. And how you describe that. Are you using website, marketing language to show and describe your organization? These are things I want you to be careful with, right? Defining the wrong problem. And the problem is never not having enough money. The problem is out there in reality. It's a problem that you can verify and that is important within your world to take on. So be careful on what is the right problem. Very dangerous if you're picking the wrong problem. It could collapse your entire persuasive structure in your proposal. Questionable solutions that you're offering. If a reviewer takes a few minutes and looks at the solution that's in your proposal, they question it, and you haven't anticipated objections. You may be out of the running. This relates to a research project, and some of you I do know do this in the recycling area, but we won't focus too much on hypothesis. Just make sure you have a good one. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right. One of the big areas is you're putting too many facts in and they're irrelevant to your argument, and so be careful how that. And if I had more time, I could show you many examples how too many facts or the wrong facts do not make your case. But be careful. The facts are tied very closely to the problem and how you prove it. Also, critical information is missing regarding significance. Your project, what you want from a funder is to support something that's significant. And how you create significant really depends on the seriousness of the problem your agency is putting together. Now, again, this is very important. I do have many examples that I give in other presentations, but I want to make sure that you're making a case for that your project is significant and important to the community for a number of years. All right, next one, overly ambitious work or study plan. Yes, this is a major problem. Too much information, too much showing that you're going to do something. Get to the point, but be careful. I just want you to put the brakes on how much information you load in. Remember, I mentioned the reviewers or the readers of your letters or sponsorship notes or whatever, they do not take a lot of time to study what you're, so make sure that clarity is paramount when you're putting together your plan and how to address the problem. Failure to use questions to develop and shape proposal content. One of my degrees has been focused on how to use questions to obtain information that makes discovery in how to address problems, how to innovate in science, and so forth. Questions are key to your ability to do a good job in selling or promoting or proposing your organization. Becoming exceptionally good at asking questions, internally or externally, will make your agency successful. Being good at asking questions is important because this is the way you are more competitive and the more innovation that comes out, asking questions and being good at it. And there's an art to asking questions. Perhaps in my bio, you see that I was in the media for quite some time and interviewing, world famous people down to people on the street, but you can always get the right information and the most interesting information and the right story by asking the right question. And I advise that for all of you to ask the right question. All right, next slide, please. Yeah, I'm not going to go through this too much, but lackluster diction, how you write about recycling, for example. Take a look at what you write, and when I say lackluster diction, it means the words you're using are, 4 or 5 syllables, 6 syllables, and they're too abstract, perhaps. I just want you to be attentive to that. Unrealistic budgets. The amount of money you propose to a funder, both in the private philanthropic world or to the government, is important, and also realistic budgets. But budgets must be tied into the objectives of what you're trying to accomplish. Too much padding or too much actually shortchanging yourself is mainly the issue. I always tell my clients that you're not asking for enough. All right, cluttered appearance, even on those online applications, how does it look to the eye? How does your font appear to the eye? All those things. Just be careful how it looks to the eye, the readability, and the ease of readability, key to your communication. All right, poor marketing strategy. Now, I just threw this in here because how do people look at you on in social media? How are you presenting yourself, your image, even on your website? How are you marketing yourself in such a way? Is it catching? Is it current? All those things. Remember, a funder will go to all these sites. They will look at you, how you present yourself on LinkedIn. They will look at how you present yourself even on Facebook. And so how are you marketing yourself on a 24/7 basis? Keep in mind, funders will check on you. They will check on you and see how you're presenting yourself. They will go to your website and see how that looks to the world. I was doing an assessment of an agency in Denver a few months ago, and I went to look at and this was a multi-million-dollar agency, and I looked at the website, and I was trying to see it as from a funder's or a sponsor's point of view. And for the life of me, because the photos were so large on the website, there's no way I could get a sense of, and there were probably less than 5 words on the home page. And there's no way I could connect, even though the photos had great emotive power, and they were so large, but I couldn't get behind that to see what is this agency all about. So that is something to keep in mind. All right, next slide. All right, next one. We'll go through these quickly. The challenges of grant seeking. This is, most of you will be putting together grants, and you have a lot of ideas. So I'm suggesting you conceive in priority projects that solve real problems, put them at the top, and also, do an assessment of the needs in the community that your recycling agency can address as a nonprofit, and start prioritizing. And I would say, my advice is to prioritize the 3 top projects or 3 top problems that you wish to solve. Go with the rule of 3s, and then start moving and developing your approaches to potential grant seekers. All right, next slide. Assess the competition. Again, this is a fact. You are in competition, most of you, perhaps with each other or with other agencies that do similar things. So it's important that you assess, who they are, what you're up against, and adjusting your positioning and your approach to problems. All right, next slide. Identifying realistic and measurable outcomes of proposed project. When you're devising a project, how do you put together objectives? Those are measurable, and they are important as you start to think through and conceptualize your project. All right, next slide. This is a big one. Now, I always want whatever proposal you make, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but I want you to relate your project or your pitch, so to speak, to the big picture. What's going on in society? When you're in your local community, what's happening and how your project fits in with that. It's very important in every proposal you prepare that you show that you're somehow related to the trends in society. All right, next one. And this is the proposal process. It's very important to meet the requirements for the deadlines of your, we talked about how to do that in a good fashion. I even have charts and flow charts on how to do proposals, so those are available. All right, next, please. Shaping the right idea for your proposal. We'll go through this quickly. Again, I have this quote, the answers you get depend on the questions you ask. Let's go on to the next slide, Wayne. Let's skip this Da Vinci exercise. There's not enough time to go through that. All right. Now, when you go and shape what are the current priorities of the grant maker and your organization, you need to learn that by investigation and research. All right, next slide. Why is the project innovative or surprising? You need to know why your project. Ask yourself, why is this project surprising or innovative? Next slide. How does your project solve current and important problems? I would suggest to all of you, go back and look at what you've been solving, how you've been doing things, ongoing issues, and what can you do differently. I think now's the time to do that, to appeal to the funders that you're refreshing or reorienting your approach to certain community issues that deal with recycling, and that you're on a roll to take on the next 2017, 2018. All right, let's go on to the next one. How do you know if your project is truly significant? Well, you know because it elicits real emotions. When they read your letter, your sponsorship, your proposal, some emotions are going through the reviewer's heart and mind. And that's, shows how significant your project is. How do you make recycling significant in the year 2017? Think about and think deeply about doing that. All right, next. What project does your project bring short-term or long-term benefits? These are just ways of brainstorming and developing your project idea. What are the short-term, and I want you to think in terms of threes again, 3 short-term benefits and 3 long-term benefits when you sort of scratch out the ideas or a project idea. All right, next, please. How practical is your project? Is it something that's going to happen within 12 months? And I always want projects to be first formed to work within a 12-month period. Figure out why they can be done and anticipate objections if it's too much that you're trying to do. But be careful. Make sure you're realistic. All right, next slide, please. So all the stories that you create through your effort, those are a part of shaping the right project idea. That's a good sign that you can create as many stories out of your project once it's finished. That's a good way of looking backwards before you're, look at your project. It's been accomplished. Now, what are the stories that may come out of that? Then go back and integrate that information into your overall proposal or how to sell your organization to a funder. All right, let's go to the next slide. Key and distinctive factors about your organization. I should tell everyone this is a very important slide because it's actually something to do with your team now. Look at your mission and vision. Look at the challenges your organization is facing. And I don't want to, I don't want to hear about money. I want the challenges your organization faces, to meet certain needs. Strategic direction. What will your agency look like 1 year from now, 2 years from now? Leadership. All these elements go into the descriptor of your organization, which actually introduces your agency to a potential funder. So add this information. What is the community perception, online and offline? The leadership, the resource experience, the assets you bring to the table. Unfair advantage. Why are you the best agency to do this work? And also tell me about your accomplishments. I want the credibility of your agency to be powerful. I want it to stand out. And so I don't want your agency to be presented as like all the others that you're involved with recycling. You have a distinctive element to your agency. Make that clear to the funder. All right, next slide, please. Finding funders in 2017. Next slide. Here's your collection of funders, government agencies. I'll just go over there quickly, just sort of how I see them. Government agencies, big money, red tape, takes time to get the check, but a lot of resources there to work on what you need to do, both state, federal, and local. Independent foundations, that again, foundations are being created, new ones every week, and there are around 80 to 90,000 foundations that give out grants. So, and it's growing. So these are the types of grant makers. Operating foundations, those are foundations that give out grants and actually do their own work, particularly in, let's say, in the recycling area. Special purpose foundations, they only focus on one thing, like Michael J. Fox's foundation deals with Parkinson's. Community foundations, which are, I would say, relevant to most of you to seek funding from. There may be issues and barriers to that, but they're based in the local community, and I would suggest meeting with them in person. Corporate foundations, they're looking at the angles that they can benefit from helping the community, so you've got to understand that. Unions, of course, have foundations, civic organizations, and family foundations. This is, again, the big area to tap into, and they're not always on the in directories, but it's up to you to find out about family foundations from estate attorneys and from investment banks in your local community. All right, next slide. Here, we'll go over quickly. These are all the types of grants. I would say most of you are involved with project grants. A general operating grant is just to improve the operations for your agency. Restricted grants for certain types of projects. Challenger matching grants, general purpose grants. The one area that I think has so much potential for agencies like yours is that you're offering a pilot project or a startup type project. That is highly appealing to funders today in 2016, 2017. Next slide, please. These are other types of re-grant programs, special projects, research. All these are parts of the how to identify your pitch, the type of grant that you want, and here it's most of this is very self-explanatory. All right, next slide, please. These are sources. Foundation Center is the number one, and I believe these slides will be available to everyone. But the one thing I want to point out is Foundation Center is your best resource on grants in the private philanthropic world. All right, next slide. Again, these are sites that are important and useful, but let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned, there are 26 federal agencies that give out grants, and those agencies aren't going away beginning in 2017. So I just want to point out that, grants.gov, Federal Register, all these are ways of finding out opportunities for your recycling efforts. All right, move on. Next slide. These are corporate, looking at corporate foundation funding search sites, Hoovers and Register. But the main thing for all of you is to get the annual report from the corporation that you may want to seek a donation from. You need their annual report, particularly if they're publicly traded, and many private companies have annual reports as well. All right, next slide, please. Next slide, grants, that's great resource. Let's keep moving here. I'll just look, there's another asset for you for looking for funding. If you go to Duke University, they have a lot of information, and it includes even opportunities for recycling and research on that area, green buildings and all this kind of thing. So the next one is very attractive too, the Franklin grants, if you need to do research. All right, these two are the most important of this set, other than the sourcing from the directly from the agencies that give grants, GuideStar and philanthropy.com. I hope that all your nonprofits are registered on GuideStar, because I know that every funder, every foundation is going to look for your 990 report. They're going to look at what you're all about. So update continuously your profile on GuideStar. It's also the best source on finding about the details related to your potential funder. Philanthropy.com is important to all of you to be tied into that site, be a subscriber, but also it offers fantastic grant-seeking fundraising resources. All right, next slide, Wayne. Blogs, let's go on the next slide. Let's skip over blogs because we're getting down to the wire here. When you're profiling grant makers, you can see this. These are things I do when I profile, plus I have contact by phone or by email with the funder. And you could look at this and review it. But again, this is a way to know who you're dealing with. All right, next slide, please. Okay, one thing I want to mention is the grant makers, they're just regular people for the they are regular people. And, you know, don't be reluctant to contact them. Let's move on. And I should mention that I have a whole way of showing how to talk to them and, you know, and working out getting a very productive conversation going with a funder. This is another tip of the day, utilizing Google Grants for nonprofits. Again, this will show you that you could use and position your agency in such a way that potential funders will take notice. Let's move on, please. We did talk about that. I want the real problem nailed. And, you know, the one thing here about the real problem, what's going to happen if nothing is done? That's the way to think about the problem you're trying to present to a funder. What will happen if nothing is done about the problem you perceive? That will add so much power to your proposal and your search for funding. All right, next slide, please. Next slide. This is the plan. Again, give me the background for how you're going to, you know, what has helped shape your idea about the plan you're presenting. Let's go on. Link your each objective, which are measurable, to each the ways of you're going to handle your project, how you're going to conduct the operations of the project. Short tables, diagrams, charts, and others are important to explain your plan. And actually, for all of you, I would recommend that highly using graphs and visual displays of the issue or the way you're going to solve the problem, the plan you're going to use. All right, next. Who's going to do the job, why they're qualified. Again, these are reminders. Let's go on to the next. All these areas, resource commitments you have to carry out the plan. Again, these are reminders, but you know they're not thought through well enough in many proposals, and I'm putting these in to remind you how important these elements are for when you're crafting your plan. All right, next one. As I said before, make sure you anticipate every objection to your plan and write about it, how you're going to go to plan B, plan C, plan D, and so forth. That shows how smart and ambitious you are and careful you are. All right, next slide. And this is how the marketing comes to it, you know, how you're going to communicate all the progress, all the intervention that you've made, and the successes in your PR plan, the media, the online, social media, so forth. It's important. Funders want to know that today. All right, next, please. Next slide. Evaluation. Yes, you have to evaluate your plan. Very important. Maximizing your clarity. We'll just go over this quickly. These are just reminders again. Send under to others what you would like to receive yourself. That's the key to your success. A couple more reminders again, and very important. Next slide, please. Oh, by the way, these are writing resources. Perhaps you are aware of these, the Purdue Online Writing Lab. You know, if you want to, you know, take an assessment of the kind of writing you're presenting to others, use these two resources. They're outstanding to improve your writing. Or if you have questions. Next slide, please. When you're doing proposals, sponsorship letters, so forth and so on, think of argumentative speech. Look at the issue from every perspective. Anticipate why and how questions. You're going to write in a journalistic style. That's why I do what I do. I love, you know, putting together a topic and make it interesting, concise, and clear, and it gets a check. Think of business writing. You know, make sure that the important points are right there at the top, both in the boxes that of the online applications and also in letters that you write. And of course, do not fear failure. Next slide. Next one, you can be inspired by others. This is one of mine favorites by John Wooden from UCLA. Yeah. Just be the best you can be in doing this process. All right, next slide. All right, keep your sanity and good luck to you. Thank you very much, everyone. I know there may be questions, so Wayne, I'll stand by.
All right, John, great presentation. Okay, we're now gonna field some questions from for our presenter. Again, if you have a question, please enter them into the GoToWebinar dialog box. And we have one here already. John, what do you suggest when there's one person who has to play the role of development person, proposal writer, and project manager? If we have a few other people to read and do QA, but only one development person plus our executive director who's doing a lot of other things. So the many hats syndrome, I guess.
Yeah, the many hats syndrome, yeah, I'd say run, but no, but number one, focus on, each day what you're going to wear different hats. If you're going to put on a development hat, that means you have to engage benefactors and so forth and so on, then you lock that down for that particular day. And then as far as research and developing content, you spend a few hours on another day. In other words, just like you have to divide your time and manage your time properly when you're having all these hats. So you prioritize. I mean, this sounds obvious probably, but I would suggest spend no more than 8 to 10 hours a week on proposal development as far as development work. Reaching out to the community, looking at events and sponsorships and all that, I would say 5 to 6 hours per week. And then, of course, your project management, I would focus on most of the other hours on managing project. Because if you have a project to manage now, that is important to succeed at. That's most important. Otherwise, you have little to write about. I hope that answer was helpful.
Okay, this one's almost more like a comment. This attendee stated the EPA, for example, is one agency that has reduced their grant making ability through budget cuts and whatever. So I guess the question I would have is, what do you do when you've for years maybe you've relied on one particular program and that program is shrinking dollar-wise? Do you have any tips on how to?
Yes, I think your next is put together a strategy plan to seek monies from private philanthropy. Look at the successes you achieved under government funding through EPA. But at this point, to be very clear, it's important that you have a private philanthropic strategy, because your success in private philanthropy will probably be more. Also, the amount of money may not be as high at times, but you could figure out how to patch together foundation sponsors or funders and get that level of money. But you need that private philanthropy effort, and it needs to be ratcheted up, especially now beginning in 2016 and 2017. You're going to see perhaps disruptive changes in agencies like EPA and so forth. So convincing the private philanthropic world is your priority, I would say, right now. You're not going to be able to change funding levels except when you meet with your local politician or congressional representative. But the strategy here is switching to private philanthropic efforts, and you'll be actually, I think, rewarded very well if you push hard in that area. Because the amount of wealth in the private philanthropic world is astounding and growing. And so I would, you could be, continue working with the EPA agency, but start putting together your plan to reach out to private philanthropy.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to let you answer it. Does it do damage to an organization when one volunteer is let loose to submit multiple grants with minimal oversight from the leaders in the organization?
Yes, yes, that's an easy one. Yes. Uh, yeah, you've got to. Well, first of all, if you're going to submit, now just get back to, you can submit, multiple grants for the same project to, funders. I mean, I think that's a good, but in terms of the machinery and the systematizing and making sure the quality is there, you need oversight, and you need management to handle that effort. Remember, every proposal that goes out the door represents your agency. And keep in mind the program officers at both in the foundation and at the government level do talk about the kinds of proposals they receive, and you want your reputation sterling and powerful, and so controlling that effort. But I'm always one for getting as many proposals out the door as possible, but I want them to be at the highest quality because they represent the agency, and that's important.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I think we're just about out of time, so I'm going to wrap things up here.
Okay.
Again, this webinar, like all the webinars in this series, has been recorded and will be made available via YouTube links on both the National Recycling Coalition and Recycling Market Center websites. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you'll join us for next month's webinar, and please visit the NRC and RMC websites for scheduled updates. John, we have your contact information here. I'm sure you might be getting some follow-up. But again, thank you for providing these resources.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for presenting this information. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next month.